So good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Amelia and I'll be facilitating today's event. I'll be joined by the following presenters here on the screen, and they'll be presenting their own sections to you once I've gone through the agenda. But before we get started, just wanted to go through some housekeeping bits with you. We ask that you keep your cameras and microphones off during the session. This session is being recorded, so you will have the opportunity to refer back to the recording as well as the slides when they are made available on the portal next week. We'll be using Slido to receive your questions. There's a QR code currently on the screen, so you can use your smartphone to join that. And I believe you could just, if you don't have a smartphone, you could just type in slido.com and just pop that number in, and you should be able to ask questions throughout. After every section today, there will be a Q&A, so you can ask questions on that specific questions, but there'll also be a section at the end where we can, if there's any questions left over, we can answer them then. I'll just give you a few more moments to join Slido. And if need be, we will pop the link into the chat just so you can access it there. I think hopefully you've all joined quite comfortably. And we'll go through the agenda. So we'll start with Paul, who's going to provide you with a brief overview of the REC.
Me already? Your intro was shorter than I expected, Millie. Thank you very much for the intro. My name's Paul Rock. I'm the Head of Communications at the REC Code Manager. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour around the REC and hope to give you some more background about how the REC came to be, the scope of the REC, and some of the key functions and features you're likely to find yourself interacting with at one point or another. So next slide, please. So the full Retail Energy Code arrangements became live way back now on the 1st of September 2021. The Code Manager was established and change governance procedures went live, and obligations in legacy code arrangements were switched off and transferred over to the REC. Actually, that milestone was go live for REC version 2, and plenty had already happened to get to that point in the life cycle of the code. And going way back to 1998, at the point that the energy retail market was opened up to privatisation, industry codes were required to facilitate the change of supplier processes. The Master Registration Agreement, or MRA, in electricity, and the Supply Point Administration Agreement, or SPA, in gas, supported the market and the consumer for over 20 years as part of a wider codes infrastructure. Over time, and with the Ofgem faster switching programme a specific catalyst, it was identified that the code arrangements could be improved. And the Retail Energy Code was designed to bring the MRA and SPA together into a streamlined dual fuel code, which would more effectively support parties understand and meet their obligations. The REC would also incorporate safety and technical metering obligations previously housed in MCOPA, MCOP, AMICOP, and SMECOP, a number of other technical codes. And critically, it would also provide a contracting vehicle for the new central switching service provider required for the faster switching arrangements to succeed. Now, in 2025, the industry arrangements continue to change at some pace. The REC is at the centre of governance arrangements for the market-wide half-hourly switching programme, a vital enabler in the creation of a clean and flexible electricity retail market, and will soon be one of the first codes transitioning to a new regulatory framework under Ofgem's Energy Codes reform, designed to allow the REC to be more efficient and responsive to the changing demands of a very fluid energy sector. Next slide, please. So, now that we've had a look at where the REC came from, let's explore what type of organisation it covers. As a dual fuel code, the REC places obligations on suppliers and the networks across both gas and electricity. And the REC introduced a new definition for the Metering Equipment Manager, or MEM. Previously, MEMs had different names within legacy codes, such as meter operators in electricity and the meter asset manager in gas, but the MEM is now the standardised and fuel-agnostic term within the REC. You may also hear the terms AMI in gas, and EMO in electricity. And these are the recognised terms for the individuals that carry out the metering works on behalf of the MEMS. So the other two elements on my diagram here are RECO and the Data Communications Company. And as REC parties, they're slightly unique cases. However, they are required to become parties to the code as it places obligations on them. RECO in its oversight role, which I'll come on to soon, and the DCC as the central switching service provider with its role within the switching process. As parties, all companies that have a license to operate in one of the categories on the screen must comply with the REC and has their performance assured by the code manager to maintain their ongoing qualification. The next slide, please. On this slide, we have a non-exhaustive list of the principal operational areas that the REC covers, and with a click, the different REC schedules that contain all the obligations that parties must comply with to ensure they're meeting the requirements of the REC in those areas. And these aren't all the schedules to the REC. You can probably tell that by the missing numbers. There are also some more process and governance driven documents that cover things like accession to the code, the change management process, and company governance. If you go into any of these schedules, you'll find a table on the first page which explains what type of party have requirements put on them within that document. And on the next slide, we have an example of this. So you can see here within Schedule 7, the Energy Theft Reduction Schedule, it presents that there are mandatory obligations within it for domestic and non-domestic suppliers, for gas transporters and electricity network operators, but not on MEMS or the DCC. So it can be a useful tool for you to quickly assess whether a document is something that you'll need a thorough understanding of for your party type. Now on the next slide, what are these documents all about then? So very briefly, Schedule 7 sets out aspects relating to energy theft, including how REC parties interact with the Energy Theft Tip-Off Service, ETOS, and how the process for the Energy Theft Detection Incentive Scheme works. Schedule 11 covers requirements for suppliers relating to managing customers on prepayment meters. 12 sets out the details for how access is granted to the electricity and gas inquiry services and the obligations on REC parties to make data available into those services. Schedule 17 sets out how electricity parties use the Secure Data Exchange Service, SDES, to communicate personal data related to consumers with each other. While Schedule 13 is specifically concerned with the exchange of priority service register data and consumer contact data. Schedule 14 sets out obligations on how metering equipment managers interface with suppliers and network operators, including the process for becoming an accredited MEM. Though rather less impactful than it once was, Schedule 18 sets out the arrangements for suppliers responsible for the management of Green Deal plans on the Green Deal Central Charge Database, the GDCC. Schedule 23 sets out the process for the management of customer registration and switching requests. And Schedules 24 to 28 were all introduced in 2022 to introduce the central switching service arrangements which underpin faster switching. Schedule 30 places requirements on parties across a whole host of issues that consumers face when trying to switch supplier, such as erroneous switches, cross meters, duplicate meters, and misdirected prepayments. Schedule 31 sets out how suppliers submit data and make and receive payments in respect to the prepayment levelization process introduced by Ofgem in 2024. And our latest schedule, Schedule 32, sets out obligations on non-domestic electricity suppliers in respect to supply of electricity to hydrogen producers. Now, in addition to all of these schedules and the main body of the REC, there are a number of user guides and operational documents which can support people using the REC as well. And all these can be found on the code products area of the REC portal. I'll come on to speak a little bit more about the portal a bit later. Okay, next slide, please. By now, you've heard me speak a lot about the REC Code Manager, but it's likely that you've also heard about RECO a fair amount too, and there can be some confusion about the difference between the two. But put very simply, RECO, or the Retail Energy Code Company, is a limited company set up with the objective of facilitating smooth and efficient running of the retail energy market. And to achieve this with respect to the code management processes, RecCode contracts with the Rec Code Manager, that's me and my colleagues, and also contracts with other organisations such as the inquiry services technical providers. They're the Rec service providers on this diagram here. But for the most part, as Rec parties, your primary point of contact into the Rec will be through the Code Manager team. Next slide, please. On this slide, I've listed many of the key services that the Code Manager provides to you. Let's start from the top. So the Code Manager runs the change management process, which allows the code to evolve to meet changing industry requirements. We facilitate the means for anybody to raise an issue or opportunity for improvement into the Code Manager, and we act as your critical friend to support you through the process of raising a change. We run consultations and impact assessments, providing timely information to ensure that you are well aware of what changes are coming into updated versions of the code. And we'll hear a lot more about the change process and how you can expect to engage and be engaged later in today's session. Following that theme, my colleagues V and Andrew will later be able to explain much more competently than me the role the Code Manager carries out to assure the performance of code parties and service providers, working to monitor market risks, assess data, and take action to remedy the shortcomings of those falling shy of performance expectations. While we won't focus on the next two rows in too much detail today, it's worth flagging that the Code Manager runs the processes by which organisations apply to become Rec parties and service users, and also supports those looking to voluntarily exit the market, making sure that the customer is protected and disruption is minimised at all stages of that process. And the sandbox and derogation process allows a party to apply to the Code Manager for a relaxation of specific obligations for a limited period of time and under certain controls. This might be to allow that party to test a new innovative product or service, which wouldn't currently be permissible under the code, but could ultimately provide consumer value. And that's called a sandbox trial. Or perhaps an unforeseen issue has led to a party not being able to implement a new change in time for its go-live date. And in that case, the party would need to apply for a derogation. And sandbox and derogation requests are managed by the Code Manager and heard by one of our committees known as the Performance Assurance Board. Moving on, the operational account managers are one of the most important methods of engagement between the Code Manager and Rec parties and service users. Every party is provided with access to a friendly face to help them deal with the Rec, and I'll let Kev speak more about that very shortly. And all of the Code Manager services are facilitated by our online platform known as the Rec Portal. There's a good chance you've already visited the Rec Portal, as it's where we held the sign-up information for this event. And on the next slide is the portal homepage in all its glory. So hopefully you recognise this screen. And most of the key aspects of the Rec Portal, such as accessing all the code documents and products and the latest news and events, you don't require a Rec Portal account for. So you can do all this as a guest user without logging in. But there are some functions that are locked behind a user account, so we do advise you to create one if you expect to be engaging with the Rec on a regular basis. And signing up for a Rec Portal account is a really straightforward process. In the top right corner of the screen, you'll see a login button. And if you click on that, you'll be presented with a guide to create a new account. When you first create an account, you won't be automatically associated with any organisation group. So if I work for British Gas, the portal doesn't know, based on my email address, for example, that I work for British Gas. You'll just be sort of orphaned from an organisation. But in the future, it might be that you're required to carry out some particular functions on the portal, such as uploading performance assurance reports. And to do this, you'll need to become associated with the organisation. Your company's master admin user for the portal can support you with that process. And if you don't know who that is, just reach out to us via our service desk and we'll point you in the right direction. My final slide, on the next slides. Very quickly, I just refer here to a number of services and tools that you might well be familiar with. I'm not going to go into any detail on these, but we host user guides for each of them on the Rec Portal within our Knowledge Centre, and we also facilitate the process for parties looking to gain access. These services aren't directly provided by the code manager, but we can still help you find information about them or point you in the right direction. So please do let us know if you come across these systems and services and you're after some additional support in using them. That's me done. Thank you very much. I think there's an opportunity for some questions now before we pass over to my colleague Kev. So I'll hold just for a minute to see, or 30 seconds to see if there's any questions that come through. Obviously, as I said, as Millie said, there'll be a question for Q&A at the tail end of the event, and I'll be sticking around for the duration of today. So if anything comes up that you think about while the other presentations are on, please feel free to stick it on Slido, and we'll address it throughout the day. But I shall now hand over to my colleague, Kev Duddy. Thanks, Kev.
Paul. Okay, so I'm Kev Duddy. I'm one of our operational account managers here at the REC. And I'm here to talk to you today about the stakeholder engagement service and what that actually means for you. So if I can have the next slide, please. So first slide shows the wonderful stakeholder engagement team. We've got the service desk team responsible for inquiries via email and web chat and phone. And we also have the operational account management team, which is split between parties and service users. But in reality, there is a lot of crossover and we work very closely together as a team. The OAMs act as second line support and cover for service desk, as well as being on hand for general queries throughout the day. And I'll talk more specifically about each of those on the next slide, please. Okay, so this slide just highlights the various different methods we have of engaging. Stakeholder engagement in the REC is designed so you can choose how you want to engage. I'll talk about the OAM service in more detail on the next slide, but in a nutshell, each party, non-party, service user and voluntary code of practice TPI is assigned an OAM, and their job is to answer any queries you might have, fix whatever problem you might have, and generally provide everyone with anything they need for their business from a REC perspective. Our service desk team manage all of the incoming queries through the inquiries mailbox. They also handle any query that comes in over the phone or direct through the web chat function on the portal. And they are very knowledgeable and can answer 90% of questions immediately on the spot, on hand 9 to 5 throughout the working week. So if you need an immediate answer, I'd suggest using that. They're fantastic. Paul's just taking you through the portal, so I'll just flag that contained within there are loads of really useful user guides and wiki articles, and that helps explain some of the processes, terms or concepts within the REC. It also has the Erin tool, of which there's a webinar on the 1st of April, shameless plug, where you can type in questions and Erin will provide an AI answer based on the information within the portal. We also have various hubs within the portal, such as the metering hub, the theft hub, the TPI hub, and you'll get given access to those upon request if you need it, have a business case to do so, and that contains specific information about those areas. Our wonderful comms team send out weekly bulletins. They have all the must-have information about goings on in the REC. Currently split out into a change specific mailing and one everything mailing, and they're broken down also so you can click on just information party type, so just suppliers or just distribution networks or MEMS, and they're really useful to make sure you don't miss anything, and I'd recommend everyone sign up for those. We also run plenty of webinars and training videos like these, and the historical ones are all also available on the portal. And as you guys are all fresh eyes to the REC, we'd be really keen to hear ideas that you could do some extra focus or webinar potential in the future. And finally, the all-important REC issues group. It's a really good forum that is open to all REC parties. It happens on the second Friday of every month. It's very much a safe space for parties to bring problems and seek advice or support in any area of the REC. Issues get discussed in a very friendly way. It might result in a party improving their understanding of a requirement, or maybe identifying existing workarounds to problems, or just getting support from other parties that it's an issue that's affecting them as well. Our performance assurance colleagues also attend very regularly to provide updates on data cleansing requirements or other things that are going on in the performance assurance world at that time. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is all focused on our OAM service and what we offer to parties, service users, and voluntary code of practice TPIs. So, as I tell my kids, we're very much a team of customer service ninjas, and that's very much how you should think of us. We're here to solve any problem and help everyone meet their obligations under the REC. In practice, that really begins at the outset of a party's REC journey. So when a party accedes to the code, they get assigned an OAM. The OAM will offer them a welcome meeting where we try to understand more about your business, how you expect to need to interact with the REC, and we can then help explain what sort of obligations you'll be expected to meet and how to progress through. As part of the welcome meeting, but also, I guess, anytime a new person joins the business, we're available to help set you up on the organisation's specific portal site area that Paul mentioned, and take you through any navigation of the portal to help you get the best out of it. We also join the conversations with our qualifications team, who will run through the market entry requirements, and we can often assist with queries and help things along in that space. And many parties also take us up on the offer of regular meetings, and these might be monthly, quarterly, weekly, or just ad hoc as and when you need them. Whatever fits your business and works for you, we want to provide that tailored engagement service. I'm sure this will get commented in more detail later by my performance assurance colleagues, but they monitor a variety of retail risks. And where parties cross certain performance thresholds, we often act as a go-between to try and understand the reasons behind that, to help see whether there's an underlying issue that needs to be addressed in code, or whether that party needs some extra support or guidance to help achieve whatever level of performance that is required. I've also got operational contacts down here, as each party type is required to provide various contact details for other parties to be able to contact them in different situations, be it investigating cross meters for suppliers, or if you're a DNO and MEMS, to know who to contact where safety situations are encountered. So our team just makes sure that everyone provides these and can make contact with each other as needed. So in summary, I guess what I want to say is OEMs are like ninjas. Stakeholder engagement service is tailored to you, and we're happy to accommodate whatever it is that you guys need from us. And I'd really recommend two things. Firstly, sign up for the bulletins and make use of your OEM meetings. We're happy to meet with contract managers or operational staff, whatever we can do to help. I think that's me. Is there a slide coming up next? There we go. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kev. There are no questions as of yet, but obviously I'm hoping you'll be staying on the call. So if there is any questions do come in towards the end, hopefully you'll be there to answer them. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm now handing over to our performance assurance colleagues. I'm handing over to V first, I believe.
Yes, thanks, Millie. Hi all, I'm Vaishnavi Sharma, or V, from the REC Performance Assurance team. Today, I'm going to talk to you a bit about what performance assurance under the REC is and how our approach to performance assurance may interact with your organization. Later on, my colleague Andrew will come and talk to you in a bit more detail on specific reporting requirements, etc., which will be important to your organization and help you understand what those key obligations are to support performance assurance. With that said, if we can move to the next slide, please. So I'm not going to go into much detail because Paul's already done a great job in telling us about the history of how the RECs come into existence. But just to touch on that, as the decision to consolidate the retail codes was to strengthen the codes within the retail sector for energy, one of the key parts of it was to establish the code manager to drive improvements. And as part of this was the performance assurance service, whose role is not just to drive improvements, but also to bring credibility and trust to the arrangements that things are working as they are meant to and give the markets that confidence. The purpose of performance assurance is to understand which parts of the arrangements are working, which are not, understanding why that is, and therefore taking informed interventions, informed actions to drive improvement in performance. How do we operate performance assurance? So we operate in a structured manner. We follow a risk management framework that we often refer to as the performance assurance framework, which is then applied to understand which of the areas of the code of the arrangements require interventions, and how can we drive improvements both at the market level as well as at a party level. As part of performance assurance, we also look at the performance of REC service providers, and we also help identify issues within the code that may need to be resolved or may benefit from clarification. With that said, if we go to the next slide, please, I'll talk about the methodology briefly. So I mentioned the performance assurance framework. There are several documents that are written down that you can find on the REC portal under category 3 code documents that actually tell you how the performance assurance framework works. Our methodology itself is documented in the performance assurance methodology and techniques document. So starting with the method that we follow, we start with risk identification. So we work with the Performance Assurance Board, or PAB, to identify which are the key risks within the retail arrangements that require monitoring and intervention. These risks are identified and documented within a document that we call the Retail Risk Register. That also can be found in the Category 3 documents on the REC portal. The Retail Risk Register tells you not just the risks that the key risks that PAB's prioritizing, but also how each of those risks may materialize, and therefore how are we measuring those risks across the market. For that measurement, we will use reports from central sources like the Central Switching Service, as well as from parties themselves. I'm just going to touch a bit more about the reporting requirements later, so I won't go into the detail, but basically we receive all of these reports on market performance, we analyze them, we evaluate them, and based on how certain retail risk scores are coming out and parties that may be above a certain threshold beyond which PAB determine performance to be at risk, in those areas, we will apply interventions, and those interventions are what we refer to as performance assurance techniques, or PATs. I'll touch upon the list of PATs in a second, but basically the whole objective is we apply these to drive improvements. The activity we've conducted, the outcomes we've seen, and the changes in performance levels that we've seen, those are all reported to PAB on a monthly basis. And the whole purpose of the performance assurance service is to give the market that confidence that performance is within acceptable limits, and where it's not, things are being done to bring it within those limits, and providing transparency over this whole thing. If we move to the next slide, please. I will touch upon the techniques that we have. So the list of all the techniques that the code manager and PAB can apply, it's documented within the performance assurance methodology and techniques document that I referred to earlier. So that document itself goes into the details of what each technique is, when it's applied, and what sorts of controls are present before applying these techniques to make sure our interventions are proportionate. So the types of techniques, we've got preventative techniques, wherein we may provide guidance, we may require parties to complete their qualification requirements, or there may be training and guided pathways. So these are techniques that we will use where we know that it's best to go and help parties understand their obligations to prevent issues downstream. There's also incentive techniques, such as we notify parties where we start to see that they may be breaching thresholds set by PAB, so that they have an opportunity to self-correct. And similarly, we've also got other incentive techniques like peer comparison, where we tell you how you're performing compared to your peer group, and also performance charges, where those can be beneficial in driving improvements. We've also got several risk monitoring techniques. These could be cross-market monitoring, where we're looking at performance of different parties across different processes. It could be specific topic monitoring, where we've identified there's an elevated risk for a particular area. We might do monitoring for a specified period. Then there's other techniques like sentiment analysis and surveys available as well. The most common technique that we often use is our assessment techniques. These techniques are there to help us. So I mentioned the data that we look at from the market. So the data will tell us that there are certain trends in performance, but it may not necessarily tell us why we're seeing those trends. So these assessment techniques are basically for the code manager and PAB to understand the context behind the data, why certain things are happening, and to determine whether some action is needed or not, as a response to that trend. So these techniques can be inquiries, where we might come and ask you for some clarification on what we're seeing. There might be information requests, where we might ask you for more data that is not available centrally, just so that we can validate what we've been seeing in the performance. There could be self-assessments, where we ask the party to assess their performance and give us comfort how they've got oversight over processes. And then there's also code manager assessments, wherein we may come and do a deeper dive review of a particular area, do some sample-based testing, etc., to see if rec obligations are being followed, and also to ensure that consumer outcomes or market outcomes are not at risk. Then come the remediation techniques. So these techniques are basically available where we identify, like we saw a trend which was indicating risk of poor performance. We've gone and we've understood the issue, and we've confirmed that there is something that's not quite right. So in order to set that right, we've got a set of techniques that we can apply. These can be action plans, periodic monitoring and closure reports, management assertion, i.e. from company directors and senior executives within the organization, or independent or a code manager validation. So these techniques are basically to see what needs to be done to fix a problem and whether that's actually been done, and performance assurance, performance improvement achieved. Beyond these techniques, there's also escalation techniques available to PAB, where parties may not engage properly, or the previous techniques haven't achieved the desired outcome. PAB may choose to apply specific conditions. This could mean, for example, for suppliers, PAB could restrict their ability to acquire new customers if there's a concern around their performance. Could be access to inquiry services, etc. There could be, PAB could determine that a referral to Ofgem is needed about the party's performance. And also in extreme cases, they may determine that an event of default must be triggered. So that is an overview of the performance assurance techniques that we have. If we move to the next slide, I would also like to touch upon the obligations all parties have to maintain their qualification. So annually, you will be required to complete an annual statement where you basically self-assert that you understand your obligations under the REC and are doing things to meet them. That annual statement is signed off by the director as per Companies House for your organization. Along with that annual statement, there could be either a compliance statement or an external assessment that you'd be required to complete. External assessments are in-depth reviews around information security and data protection. We would not do these annually. We would usually do these on a cycle of once in 3 years. So we would do a deeper dive review, ask you for a bit more information on how you're confirming certain things, and get the company director to sign that off. In the years where we're not doing an external assessment, which is the deeper dive review, we would require you to complete the compliance statement. Beyond these, as part of your maintenance of qualification requirements, you are also required to disclose to the code manager instances where you may be making a system or process change. These disclosures should be made when you start planning these changes, so that we can have oversight over the controls you've got in place and basically ensure that the changes will be delivered in a controlled manner. So that's a whistle-stop tour of everything, like how the different performance assurance processes work. And I will now pass on to my colleague Andrew to take you through a bit more on reporting, and then we can take any questions from you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Vi. Good morning, everybody. So we'll talk about just a little bit about the data we collect, and then how we use that and how it's presented back, building on what Vi's covered there. So first sort of, I guess, document to be aware of is referred to as the Performance Assurance Reporting Catalogue. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the park, and there's obviously sort of the breadcrumb on how to get to that. It does get updated periodically, so always worth checking. You're looking at the latest version from the portal. It is a Category 2 document, so that does mean it goes through a formalised change process as well. So the park contains details of all the data that parties have to submit, and depending on which party type you are, which items they relate to support the monitoring that V's talked about there in terms of performance assurance. And that also extends specifically to reporting around energy theft under the Theft Detection Incentive Scheme, which is Schedule 7 of the REC. Basically sets out what format that needs to be and what the fields are, what the detail of those fields are. Also importantly, because a lot of the data we look at doesn't come from individual parties, but is about parties, but collected from central data sources like the Central Switching Service, it also does provide some detail on that data as well. So if you're interested to see what data we are collecting about parties, it gives you a good kind of holistic view if you want to look at that. As it says, different requirements apply to different party types, so you can obviously sort of filter down on that. And obviously, if you've got specific questions, first port of call, as with most things, will be your OAM. And then obviously they can kind of pull the performance assurance data team into that if that's an appropriate thing to do. So really just to know that that's there. I think many of the people on this call today are in organisations who are already part of the REC, so there will already be somebody in your organisation probably dealing with this and providing the data to us. But useful to know it's there. That's probably all I'd say on Park. If we go to the next slide. So that's the data coming in. The other thing is then how do we share information back with you? One of the key ways we do that is through the performance assurance dashboards. So these are a series of Power BI based dashboards available in the REC portal, primarily within your particular organization's specific performance assurance area. And what they basically allow you to do is see the data that we're looking at about you can see that as well. So, you can see what we can see, if you will. And in some cases, also data about other parties, often on an anonymized basis, so that you can kind of see how you're comparing to peers. If we go on to the next slide as well, thank you. So if you go on to the performance assurance part of the portal and go into your particular organization's site, you'll see a whole series of these kind of square boxes, and we've just taken the ones that are dashboard related there. So with the dashboards are broken up into a number of different types. So there's the performance assurance dashboard, which I guess is kind of the core performance assurance activity, and then there are some specific dashboards related to I guess more specific areas that will not always apply for every party. So there's one particularly for the smart metering installation survey. Obviously that applies to suppliers who are installing smart meters. There's one that applies specifically to the TDIS scheme, so the Theft Detection Incentive Scheme that I mentioned. And then there's one that applies in respect of SLA. So that's really only if you're a service provider within the REC that becomes relevant. So for example, if you're a supplier, you won't see that. Oh, sorry, could we just stay on that slide for a sec? If you're a supplier, you won't see that SLA dashboard. But if, for example, you are a DNO, because obviously you provide elements of the service provision and switching, then you will see that. And each of those, as I say, shows you your data and then some anonymized data. You can drill down. Obviously, we've not actually got the detail because we don't show other people's data there, but you can drill right down in many cases on risk drivers to individual meter point level reporting. So The idea is, in the first instance, you should be able to see your performance and also actually, take action on the back of that, hopefully before, kind of some of those performance assurance techniques start to come to bear. If we do now go on to the next slide, thank you. So just to give you a bit of a who sees what. So the PA risk dashboard, effectively relevant across parties, but suppliers and DNOs primarily the two party groupings who'll look at that. So you'll see your performance against the risks as per the risk register, which we mentioned. If you're a supplier, there's also a peer comparison live at the moment around erroneous switches, and then we also run the monitoring of the aggregate data cleanse work that goes on, which is part of the performance assurance activity through that. As I say, TDIS gives you access to the TDIS related information, so allows you to really check if you've reported a theft to us, have we accepted it all the way through the process, or if not, why not? Make sure you can check that the data's coming through, and then it's also how we communicate theft targets and the debit and credit calculations that occur each year. SMIS does what it says on the tin. You can see both your and other party data there. SLA, you can see if it's relevant to you, you can see your SLA data. And then there are a couple of other dashboards. So the PAB have access to a dashboard. That's only available to obviously PAB members, as well as the Performance Assurance Code Manager team. Basically, they can see everything that's in your party dashboard, apart from they can't see meter point level detail. And they can obviously see who everybody is. So it's unanonymized, obviously to support the role. And then there is actually a public dashboard as well. So there are two things in that at the moment. So one is the SMIS data, and the other is the peer comparison data goes in there, but on an anonymized basis. So you can see kind of how the market shape is, but you don't know who the individual suppliers are. Excuse me, sorry, terrible cold. So just a bit of an idea of what you can see where. There is a detailed user guide for the dashboards available on the portal. And if we go to the next slide, actually, because I think we've taken it, yeah. So there's some pictures of the dashboards just to give you a kind of feel for how they look. If you go and have a look in the user guide, you'll see lots more of those illustrations, how to get there, what's in there, and also, kind of how to use the filters and the different things there. So if you do want to, kind of get into the detail of that, the user guide is a good place to start. And then going back to what I was saying before, OEMs obviously a good contact point, and then obviously from there further support available. Your OEM has access to your dashboard as well, so if you've got a query, you can get on a call with them and they can look at it as though they are you effectively, to help you understand that. Data in these screenshots and all of the user guides is obviously kind of fake data, if you like, so it's not particular parties. We've got a question. Sorry, let me just plug my other in. So if you can't see any dashboards, yes, that is correct. So when you go if you go through onto the portal, go into the performance assurance area, you'll get a page where you have to pick your organization, and then you should see those boxes that I had a couple of slides ago. If you don't see those, that's because by default, I think, you don't get given access to dashboards, and your master admin user for your organization can give you that access, or you can go through the help desk and they will help you set that up. And then you'll see those tabs come through. In terms of the data behind the dashboard, so Paul, if it's around things like performance assurance, which I think is probably the main one, for each of the risk drivers, and those are defined in the retail risk register. We won't do the whole of risk driver definition in an introductory webinar. That's probably going a bit too deep. As I say, you can drill down in the majority of cases. So in some cases, we don't have the data at meter point level. Where we do have the data at meter point level, you can drill right down to that. So for example, if you had, we have a risk driver around erroneous switch resolution, and if we've got, you've got 40 items that you've not resolved within the SLA, you can drill down and see what those 40 meter points are, and some details around those, so that obviously you can, one, obviously you might be monitoring that yourself, sort of check whether that looks consistent with what you're seeing, and two, take some action around those. So you can do that, and you can export selected data as well from the dashboard. So again, if there's, a detailed list of meter points that you want to pull out and then, divvy up across a team to work, yes, you can do that.
Thanks, Andrew. We'll just see if
No
any more
worries.
do come in. Although, as I've said, I think all the presenters are staying on the call. So if any questions do spring to mind, there will be an opportunity to ask those towards the end of the session. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Lydia, who's going to go through the REC change process. Hello.
Thank you, Millie, and hello, everyone. It's exciting to be here. My name's Lydia. I'm one of the analysts working on the Retail Energy Code. I'm here to talk to you today about the REC change process. So a big area for how you guys can get involved to make modifications to the code. So if we go on to the next slide, please. I've got a bit of an overview of sort of what sort of things does the REC change team do, and how does this really sort of feed into the REC change process. So we do all sorts of things in the REC change team, but we do primarily I've broken down to sort of 3 rough areas. The first being party engagement. So obviously we're a code that very much likes to work with parties, work with service providers to make sure that we're collaborative, that your views are understood, that we're really sort of consulting of industry at large to make sure that change we put through is sort of respective of the what's right for everyone. So with that in mind, we do consultations, we impact assess, we run working groups, which I'm sure some of you should be aware of already, or if you're not, I'm sure we'll have useful links to these at the end, but loads of ways to get involved that we facilitate. We work on solution design. So obviously when we're sort of facilitating change, we need to change the code in a positive way. We need to workshop that. So we do things like, we do the legal drafting to change the REC. We understand the causes of problems in the REC. We do cost benefit tests to make sure that changes to the REC are going to be sort of working in the best way possible for everyone. So we're really sort of there in the heart of, actually sort of workshopping change to the REC. And then we do things like process management as well. So one of them, I'm sure we'll hear, you've already heard about this already, or you will hear about it, but the REC portal is a great way to get involved. We make sure that change updates in there are sort of put through in a timely and effective manner. We plan change and we prepare all the documentation that sort of acts as a window into what's happening in the change world. So these are the ways really that we as a team sort of facilitate change to the code. And if you go into the next slide, you'll see who we all are. So yes, here we are. We're a fun bunch. There's me, James, Caroline, Flo, and Harriet. And I think you'll be hearing from Harriet later on about the market-wide half-hourly settlement program. But this is us, the REC change team. If you go on to the next slide, we have an org chart. So there we all are. And above us, there's Holly, the REC change delivery and release manager. And then above her, it's Paul Whitten-Doris, the head of change and modifications. If we go on to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about the categories of REC change. So we sort of break down change to the REC as a code into sort of several distinctions. The first is how we've categorized documents. So REC documents that go through the change process are categorized as 1 through 3. And you can find more details of this on the REC baseline statement on the REC portal. But essentially, and this is a little bit of a mini generalization, but a category 1 change is any change to a major REC schedule. So these are the things that really sort of set out the main obligations in the REC. So this will be things like metering operations. This will be things like, switching and consumer-facing billing and switching issues. So the real sort of fundamental core processes. Category 2 documents tend to by and large be more sort of operational documents, so access to APIs, access to the inquiry services, these sort of things are sort of the things you may find in a category 2 document. And category 3 documents are one level down from there as well. So this may be a guidance document, for example. Category 1 and 2 documents follow the official REC change management process, and category 3 documents fall under a separate category 3 change process. I'll be covering the category 1 and 2 change process in this presentation today, and the category 3 change process I won't be covering, but you can find more information on the portal about that afterwards if you're interested to learn more. Changes follow one of 2 pathways, so they're either a self-governance change or an authority-determined change. So what this essentially means is who has final arbitration on whether this change goes into the code or not. If it's an authority-determined one, that final arbiter is Ofgem. There's a set of criteria for whether Ofgem will have this role, and that's if a change proposal is likely to satisfy one or more of the criteria that Ofgem have set out. And I won't go through all of these, but they're things like material impacts on the existing supply of all consumers, fundamental impacts on the material supply of energy across the UK, or competition in the market. So real sort of big, sort of core, deep changes that affect everyone tend to be the authority to determine ones. And Ofgem have the final say. Anything else is self-governance, where REC committees in the change process have the final say on that. So a quorate panel will meet and vote and approve a change through a majority vote process, and that's how those changes are decided, whether they go into the code or not. And changes are either urgent or standard, affecting their sort of timescale of progression. So that's sort of a rough overview of sort of the flavour of a change. If you go on to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about the REC portal. So I'm sure you've already heard about the REC portal, but there is a change and release hub where you can find out all the cool information about change and release specifically. So from here, you've access to all the sort of the core pages that affect change and how you guys can get involved in change. So you'll find the register on here, which is a summary of every live modification. The code releases, where all the changes that have been approved and are about to go into the code, but not quite yet. So they're sort of scheduled to go in one of the 3 major releases in the year, either in February, June, or November. Those can be found in that section. Your consultations and impact assessments are on here, how you guys can get involved and give your say on how you'll be affected by change, as well as a category 3 change log. We can find all those category 3 changes I mentioned earlier. They're all flagged on there. And also, importantly, how you guys can raise a REC issue or change yourselves if you think there's a way that the code could be improved, or you've identified an area where it could be working better. So this is a brief summary of the main sort of landing page for you there, where all these options are. If we go on to the next slide, I'll give you a little snippet of the change register. So like I said, this is all of our live modifications live on here, and there's a lot of core information on there, like who's impacted. So you'll see there, that one at the top there impacts REC committees, the one below it impacts energy suppliers and DNOs. You'll also find the stage, so all these ones are an initial assessment, but you can also see whether a change is in consultation on here, whether it's about to have a vote, and you can filter through all of this. So a great way to sort of get like a slice of all the live modification at the moment. Next slide, please. We also have this represented graphically. So we've got a little sort of matrix, the change portfolio view, and I've had to zoom out a little bit here, but you can explore this more on your own devices if you like. But this is essentially sort of like a matrix of all of our live modifications and changes mapped on one axis against their priority score. So is it critical? Is it lower priority relatively? And along the top, the stage. So you can see here, is it in assessment? Is it in on hold? Is it nearing its vote? Is it awaiting implementation? So it's a great way to see the current sort of scope of all of our changes laid out, represented sort of graphically. So a nice little sort of pit stop to see what everything looks like. And if we go on to the next slide, the last major part of the, and obviously there's more to see on here, but the other sort of bit I draw your attention to is the release hub, where, as I was saying earlier, all of our changes and issues that are sort of scheduled to go live are listed on here, so you can see what's going to impact your organisation, the new obligations coming in, and those are mapped out in a calendar view there. So let's have an overview of the portal, and now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the actual change process itself. So if we go on to the next slide, we can see here, and I won't go through all of this, but changes follow a relatively sort of linear progression. So they start off as either an issue or a change, and I'll get into a little bit more on that in a minute. They go through a verification and an assessment stage where we sort of understand a little bit more about the background. They go through a definition stage where we flesh out the solution if there's not been raised of one, and we do impact assessments to start to build a business case. Then we have a consultation process where we hear your views, and then we proceed to a vote, and then we proceed to the eventual release into the code if it's approved. And you can see at the top where the code manager activities feed in, and you can see at the bottom where it's your chance to feed in as well as stakeholders. So we'll go through all of this a little bit more in detail sooner through the rest of the presentation, but that's like a rough sort of overview of what the whole process looks like in a linear progression. The next slide has some fun stats for you. We have got a little bit of a summary here of all the things in our portfolio. So we have 68 live changes at the moment. Those are ones being worked, and then 10 that are awaiting implementation and 4 that are awaiting a decision from Ofgem. And then you can see here, for those of you who've been engaged with the REC for a while, last year in July, we approved a change to how we manage change, so very meta, But you can see here that before and after that, the amount of time it takes us to complete change has sort of really been reduced. So a much more sort of lean, fast, agile change process. But I'd be glad to share more about that. But that's all for now on the stats. If we go on to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about how changes can progress. So rec change is raised in one of two ways. It's either raised as an issue or it's raised as a change. The distinction here being that issues are raised of an I number. So if you go onto our portal, you'll see references such as I0198, I0196, for example, or changes of an R number. So R210, for example, or well, there are many other examples off the top of my head, but I can't think of one. But yeah, they're either I's or R's. The difference being that issues of an I number are raised without a fully formed solution. So in this case, someone's come to us with a problem and they said, well, we'd like to fix this in the rec, but we're not quite sure how to do it. In that case, we'll pick that up. We'll go to various industry forums and groups. We'll workshop that. We'll produce a solution, impact assess it. But for anything that's proposed without a solution, it'll be an issue. But anything that's been proposed helpfully with a solution, so the proposer has said, well, I'd like to fix this problem, and I think we can do it like this, that's raised as a change. And we may or may not still impact assess it, but that doesn't need that solution development cycle. We'll obviously still assess the solution, but it won't need to go through the full sort of, workshopping elements. So those tend to go more into sort of like a straight to consultation pathway instead of an R number. And if we go on to the next slide, I've represented this graphically. So issues start off at the top and they have a little solution development cycle with impact assessments before they become changes. Whereas changes, they may still have that impact assessment, but they don't have that solution development cycle. But then after that, everything converges and there'll be a consultation and there'll be a vote and there'll be that level of governance there. So if we go on to the next slide, again, just another little representation of that. Our changes are broken down into sort of three sort of main sort of phases. So the definition phase, where we do a lot of our solution development, the change proposal phase, where once we have a solution, an issue becomes a change. It becomes into this change proposal sort of gating, where we do consultations and business case assessments, and then the voting phase, where there is the final vote, and it either goes to Ofgem if needed, or it goes into the code otherwise. But yeah, this is how we sort of break down change. So issues tend to go straight into definition when they're raised. Changes tend to go straight into change proposal, definition capturing that solution development work I mentioned earlier. So how do we document this? How can you follow along with the process, and how can you read our summaries of the progression of a change? So if we go on to the next slide, we capture these in our change reports. So this is our written report where we summarize all the work we're doing on the change. It's the best place to go for all the most thorough updates, all the sort of summary of the work we've done so far. These change reports are the basis of committee votes. These are the ones that are seen by the REC change panel and its delegated committees for voting purposes. And these reports are broken down as sort of 4 phases here, 4 levels, if you will. So if we go on to the next slide, I'll summarize these. So a level 1 report, the proposal plan, this is your background information. This is if you're trying to find out more about a change or an issue as it's been raised. This is your sort of one-stop shop for the background. So this will have the summary, the problem statement. So what are we actually trying to achieve and fix here? Who is impacted? So if you are a DNO, for example, and you'd like to find out whether you as a DNO will be impacted, we'll have summarized this here in this report. And also the main progression milestones. So our expectation of when we're likely to do a consultation in the future, when we're likely to impact assess. So this is our sort of main sort of background and summary. And I should say as well that these reports are iterative. So a level 2 report contains all the information from a level 1, a level 3, all the information from 2 and 1. So these build upon the previous elements. The level 2 report, impact assessment, is what we publish prior to an impact assessment. This contains all the information a party or a service provider may need to be impact assessed, so the solution and the draft legal text. Level 3 is the pre-consultation report. This contains everything you would need to be able to complete a consultation. It'll have the summaries of the impact assessments, so all of our costings that we got from that, all of the benefits I've identified. And this will allow you to make a determination on the change. So you'll have the cost benefit case here, the business case assessment and the solution all in one place. So the level 3 report is a very thorough one that we use for consultations. And finally is the level 4 report, the one that the responsible committee or panel will see prior to the vote. This contains everything in the previous versions, as well as all of the outcomes from the consultation. So all of your views represented and summarized in written form in this report for the change panel to make their final decision based on. If we go on to the next slide, here's a little sort of pictorial representation of how you guys can get involved with us. So we're really big on engagement. I think, as you can see from the end of impact assessments and consultation we do, your voices are really sort of critical to making sure that industry is really sort of heard and represented in the change process. So you can get involved through change reports. So whenever we publish one of these reports, we open them for comments. So if you're reading it and you think, I have some thoughts about this, you can submit it on the REC portal, or you can tell us directly. Anyway, you're happy to get involved and give your thoughts on a change report. We're glad to hear. Impact assessments. So if you feel the organisation is going to be impacted by this, if we proposed a solution that may mean that your FTE costs change, you have a new obligation, you may need to build something to be compliant, this is your chance to tell us how this is going to affect you in great detail so we can really flesh out our cost-benefit case for the change. Consultations. This is before the vote, like I said, so this tends to be more of a chance to really tell us, what do you actually sort of really think about the solution and the legal text and the full nature of the change in a very sort of rounded sort of final way. So this is really important to get your thoughts on for panel consideration. And lastly, the change register. So like I said at the start, this is a real sort of view everything going on at once. So this is a great place to sort of get involved and sort of, really understand what the REC is working on at a sort of a top level and give us your thoughts there. If we go on to the next slide, there are other ways to engage with us as well. So every week on a Friday, we send out a REC change bulletin. This contains all the main updates from that week and our main business. So if we published a report, if we're about to consult, if there's information request or a way to get involved, this will be captured on here. So a great email to sign up to get sort of basically a sort of, summary of everything going on that could be important for your organisation that week in the REC. Our fantastic team of operational account managers, they're a great resource. Reach out to them. They will know everything about the REC. They will help you on any of your queries. They network with us, the change team, so that we can get all the information to you guys through your OAM. The REC portal service desk, great one-stop shop on there. The little sort of web chat help bubble in the corner. That's a great way to get involved and ask questions. Our release webinars, so every time we have one of our major releases, one of our ad hoc releases, our release manager will sort of summarize everything that's going on and how all those changes will impact you and what their go live means. So it's a great place to drop in and learn more there. And the REC podcasts as well. So this is a great resource where we sort of talk about maybe really interesting things that are going on in the team we think would be really cool to highlight. So I did one of these a while ago where we highlighted an information request coming out for one of the changes I was working on about gas market messages, and we used the podcast to highlight that and showcase it. Made a really good turnout on that as a result. So a lot of ways you can get involved, a lot of ways you can find out what's happening in the REC world. And I think that's just about me. I think this is the presentation over. So I appreciate it's a lot to take in, but that is the REC change process. And I think we've got some questions.
You take which one one you think first.
Well, we'll start at the top.
Yeah.
And I'll read this out for everyone in case, just in case. From Barry. When engaging with a change proposal, do you prefer a supplier to submit one combined response, even if they have both domestic and non-domestic businesses? Great question. Really, up to you. I've seen consultations and impact assessments where organisations have responded. You see this a lot where an organisation is both functioning potentially as a supplier and as a MAM or as a supplier in both the non-domestic and the domestic spaces. It's entirely up to you, however you feel most comfortable. We're happy to receive them in either format. Sometimes it's cool to get it broken down where you can really have a clear demarcation between impacts in one part of the REC and one part in another. But sometimes if they're combined, it's great to see that because you get more of a sense of a sort of a REC party's holistic impact at a broader level. So I think whichever way you'd like, we're happy to receive the engagement. So I know that's not a one way or the other answer, but hopefully that's helpful. And there's a lot of freedom in how you respond. So we'd be glad to get a response either way, as long as you do respond, basically. And the second question, also from Barry, do some larger changes come to the REC following consultation from the likes of Ofgem/DESNZ, but it's determined REC are best to manage it? Yes, great question. A good example of this would be the recent change to the payment method levelization scheme. So I'm sure all suppliers on the call will be aware of this, how this started life in COVID as a way to basically make sure that prepayment consumers weren't paying more for the same amount of supply as their credit consumers. That started off as a scheme administered by DESNZ and Ofgem. Then it came through to the REC and RECO for us to sort of implement that into the code. and that was, I believe, in Rec Change R0147. And then more recently, I handled the sort of the part 2 to that, where we expanded that out to include single versus multi-register meter readings. So in R0182. So yes, it's a good question. We do see change come through that pipeline. The levelization scheme being a good example. And I'm sure you'll hear much more about MHHS later, but that program produces a lot of change that comes through and is delivered through the REC as well. So we do act as sort of a conduit for these sort of bigger, larger schemes and regulators and DESNES as well. So yeah, anyone can raise a REC change, be that consumers can raise REC changes directly as private individuals, REC parties can, service providers can, Ofgem can, DESNES can, even other codes can. We get a lot of change raised through the BSC, for example, the Balancing and Settlement Code. So anyone can submit a change. But yes, I hope that's answered your question. I saw a thumbs up. I don't know if it was from you, but I think hopefully that's answered your question.
Lydia. We'll move on now to April, but Lydia, I hope will stay on the call. So if there are any other questions, we can get to those towards the end of the session. But thank you.
No worries. Thank you for having me. Cheers, everyone.
Brilliant, thank you. So hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is April Harbour and I work within the REC Technical Services Code Manager arm. So today I'm going to provide an overview of the digital REC and the REC data specification. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so firstly, Paul spoke a bit earlier about the REC schedules. Now we're just going to have a look at how we can access them. And to do this, you very simply need to have access to the REC portal, select the code products option on the top banner, and then the REC and the REC schedules option. And to the next slide, please. You'll then be taken to the page where all of the REC schedules are listed. Here you have the option to download the schedule in a PDF format or open the schedule in a non-editable format within your browser window. There is also functionality under the REC portal that will allow you to access the REC schedules and other REC documentations in a digital format, and this is all embedded within the website interface. We're specifically going to look at the REC schedules in this example. So all you need to do is open the schedule. To open the schedule in a digital format is find the schedule you wish to view and then select the last option on the bottom right of the portlet box, which is the little right-hand arrow. This will then direct you to the digital version of the schedule. The digital format does require you to be logged into the portal. So if you're not already, you will be prompted to do so. And if you don't have a login, you complete the sign up from the login page. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the schedule shown will always default to the live version. You can see the version history table, which will confirm the iterations and the release dates of previous releases. There is an AI embedded search function available on all digital REC documents. So you can search for terms and clauses. Once the search criteria has been entered, the page will automatically navigate you to the first instance which is relevant. The search bar will indicate how many occurrences are found within the document, and you can use the up and down arrows to navigate through these. Go to the next slide, please. So the contents of the schedule are also confirmed above the legal text. So if you select on a specific section, you will automatically be navigated to the relevant section you've chosen. And additionally, once you are within the legal text, anywhere a REC-defined term is used, this is underlined, and selecting one of these options will then open a separate browser window where the defined term description can be found. So this, in some cases, does also include options where there's a specified market message, and that's used within the contents of the legal text. So I mentioned earlier that there are a number of other documents within the REC portal that have a digital REC option. So if you ever see the little right-hand arrow, then this document has all of the associated functionality on search and access that we've just seen within the schedule. And if we go then into the next slide, please. So now we're going to look at the REC data specification, what it is and how your organisation can use it to support your operational activities. So the REC data specification catalogue describes the data items and market messages, or you might more commonly know them as data flows, that are used by energy industry parties to send and receive information. So the data specification contains information on not only REC-owned data items, but also data items governed under separate codes such as the Balancing and Settlement Code, so the BSC, the Distribution Connection and Use of System Agreements, so the CUSA, and the Smart Energy Code, which is the SEC. The REC data specification items can be accessed through the REC portal under the code products. This includes more information than just the catalogues. It also has documents such as technical specifications, interface specifications, rules and guidance documents to support your use in understanding and interpreting the information that's contained within the catalogues. Today, we're just going to focus on how you can access and view the data specification, market messages and data items. So as you can see on the screen, there's an option for both market messages and data items, and that's because each of these areas has an associated detailed search interface that is available. We can move to the next slide, please. So if we were to select the market messages, you'll be directed to the dashboard that's shown on the screen. Here you can search and filter to find the market message you're looking for, or if you're not entirely sure, you can use the full list of messages that can be scrolled through. The search function allows you to use the identifiers for the market message reference, the local or legacy reference, which can be things such as the D0, the A0, on job, etc., if that's a more familiar terminology that you're used to, or the full message name. The search function also allows full and partial searches and will return results as is relevant on that basis. So once you've found the market message that you wish to view, all you need to do is select it from the list and the page will open in full. We move to the next slide. So this is our market messages page. So once you're within the market messages page, you'll see full details of the message, including its names, references, versions, descriptions, and any notes. You'll also see a list of appropriate scenario variants for the message. So the scenario variants table details which industry parties can send and receive the message, and each combination of source, so the sender and target, the receiver, has a unique variant ID. The table also confirms the owner, which is essentially the code under which any changes to it would be governed. And it's the selection from the scenario variants table which determines the structure table, as you can see on the right-hand side. And there may be different structures, conditionalities or rules associated to a market message, depending on who is issuing or receiving it. So it's really important to ensure that you are selecting the appropriate scenario variant to ensure you have full details on how that message needs to be populated. The flow structure table also details exactly which data items can be sent within the message. All of the data items have underlying links, so you can select them and then be taken to the data items page for further information. And if we can go to the next slide. So if we were to go back to our main menu and select on the data items, we'll then see the dashboard that's shown on the screen here. And we can use this search function for any of the criteria identified in the main table. So that's the identifier, the local reference, or the name. And again, both full and partial service searches can return results. You can also scroll through the full list of data items if you haven't got a search criteria. And again, once you found the one you wish to view, you simply select it and you'll be taken to the data items page, which is on our next slide. So this page provides a full overview of the data item, including its references, descriptions, data formatting rules, and any relevant notes to support parties. Additionally, if a data item has an appropriate value that must be used for relevant circumstances, the value and the description are confirmed under the data enumerations table. The final table that you see on the screen there will provide a view of all the market messages that data item is included within. And once again, you can select from this table and that will direct you to the market messages page, as we saw previously, so that you can see the scenario variants that are associated and the flow structure table. Then move into our next slide, please. So we've looked at the data specification information on market messages and the data item dashboard that are contained within the portal, but there are also other formats which the whole catalogue can be viewed. So by selecting the data specification catalogues option under the code products, you'll be given the option to download the full data specification in a number of formats. So you can have it in a machine readable format, which is a SQL Backpack file. You do have to have SQL Backpack installed on your device in order to download it in this format, or you can download it in a human readable HTML format. Additionally, there is also the electricity data transfer catalogue that's in an Access database format that can be downloaded. And from this page, you can also find the data specification model and the energy market data specification standards definition document, which are both really, really useful to support your understanding of the REC data specification. So I think that is our final slide. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, April. No questions as of yet, but I'm hoping you'll stay on just a bit longer, just in case there is anything that comes in towards the end. And I believe we're on to our penultimate agenda item, and I'm going to pass over to my colleague Harriet, who's going to provide a brief overview of MHHS.
Hi, thanks, Millie. Hi, everyone. So I work in the change team in the Rec Code Manager, but focusing very much on market-wide half-hourly settlement, which I believe Paul gave you a little mini mention of at the beginning of the call. If we go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for those that are really new into the energy world, or particularly the REC or market-wide half-hourly settlement, this is a programme that is very much in live and running now. It's an industry programme that has kind of significant impacts across the electricity market. So it comes out of a significant code review, and it's all about using smart meter kind of capabilities to make sure that the settlement process can be more accurate and more timely. And with that, it's an enabler for new products and services that will mean things like, can lower bills, we can respond to demand and appropriate tariffs and things like that. So it's a big and important programme for the industry. And Ofgem published their decision in April 2021 to press ahead with that, and that's the programme that we're now very much in the midst of and working towards that kind of go live later on this year. REC, obviously, as part of the industry arrangements, we have obligations within the REC to make sure we deliver to that programme. If we go on to the next slide. This is quite busy. I've provided this slide on the basis that you'll have the slide pack afterwards. I'm not going to go through every single word that's on the slide, but there's a new target operating model for the whole of the electricity market, and it introduces new roles. So, for example, where we currently have data collectors, there'll be data services, metering equipment managers, mowers, there'll be metering services. So there's a shift around in some of the market roles that are out there. Also, the way the market is segmented is going to be slightly different. And if you look at the kind of verticals within the graphic there, there's the smart market segment, advanced, and then the unmetered, and they have different processes and things that are applicable depending on which segment. So that's a shift for everyone as well. As I say, it impacts all industry parties in the electricity space, and everyone will need to operate under this new TOM and implement, design, build, test their own systems and qualify in the market segments that they want to operate in. All MPANs across the industry will need to migrate into the new arrangements, and that's a kind of an 18-month period that'll happen over. And another kind of supporting element to that is that currently kind of central data is under the market domain data. That is going to shift to a new industry standing data set as part of that new operating model as well. Go on to the next slide. Thank you. So how and when is it happening? It's happening now. The programme has, the way it's worked is that it's gone from a design-led programme. So the design has been worked through over the last couple of years, and then the impacts into the code and how that needs to be reflected in the REC and the BSC, CUSA, has kind of been the next step. So the design was the first point. That's there's been lots of engagement across the industry on that, and then we've translated that into what needs to go into the live code at the point of go live. One of the things that's new is the introduction of the data integration platform, and that will be used for new market messages to exchange information and data across the industry, across market participants, and that's in a much quicker turnaround kind of way instead of kind of the overnight sharing. They'll be off the back of somebody making an update that would then come through in the next couple of hours, for example. The table underneath in green is the programme milestones, and they apply to kind of all the codes in the industry that are relevant for electricity. And the ones I've done in bold there, M8 and M10. So M being milestone. M8 is when the code changes are delivered. So that's the REC release and the BSC in the standard kind of industry releases that we have 3 times a year. This will be an additional release to that in September. Imminently, kind of over the next couple of weeks, that date will be updated to the 22nd of September, and that's because the weekend that the systems actually go live is the weekend just before the 24th of September, and that kind of program milestone of M10 is when it kind of gets approved that everything runs smoothly. But the actual code release will be on the Monday morning to align with the systems go live. And then the other kind of key dates there from a REC perspective are when migration starts for suppliers to start migrating MPANs over to the new arrangements, and that's in October this year as well. If we go on to the next slide. Thank you. So there are a number of impacts across the REC code itself, in the REC documents, so the schedules, in the data specification and some of the category 3 documents. So yeah, no, that's fine. Can have those ones up. Thank you. So the first kind of area of impacts kind of in from a processes perspective. So there's updates to how the supplier agent, the metering, no change to the meter appointments process itself, and how that information is exchanged through the registration service and the central switching service. But there's also an addition of a new role, the smart meter data retriever, that needs to be communicated, and that's a new process that's been added in. From a switching impacts perspective, the switching itself doesn't change, but the way and the timing of the communications of those switches and has been updated, and it's going to be communicated via the DIP, the data integration platform. And then there's the forward and reverse migration processes. I'm not going to go into details of that. If people have got questions, absolutely they can raise those. If we click again, thank you. So from a services perspective, in the REC, there's updates to the electricity inquiry service that will have a new, that's kind of a full kind of refresh, as it were, that will go live at that system switch on and code go live in September. We're starting to, in the REC, we'll be maintaining the meter configuration data for standard settlement configuration and time pattern regime. That's probably quite specific and people might not know what those are, but that's something that is currently maintained in the BSC and is coming over to the REC. And then from a performance assurance and qualifications perspective, there are updates across there as well. And then finally, the data specification updates. So we've got, if you do click on again, that's fine. So the existing DTC market messages, the D flows and the data items there's some updates that are needed to support MHHS in the DTC messages. There's the new data integration platform and the messages that are going to be used there. And then also within the data specification is the supply number format. So because of some of the data items that are changing under the MHHS arrangements, that's impacted the supply number format. So that's the supply number that needs to go on all the bills and or an annual statement once a year. As a minimum, that's being updated, and that'll be effective from the go live as well. And then if we go on to the next slide. So that is a very high level view. It does impact quite a lot of things across the REC, but we are not the only code that's impacted. Obviously, it is based around settlement, and the BSC are essential, and the introduction of the DIP and the new DIP manager and the DIP rules that support that are another code. Then, so as kind of people new to the REC, and if you're not aware of the MHHS programme and you need to get involved, the programme are definitely the first point of call. So the email address is on there. If you're already engaged but you need support on your qualification, from a REC perspective, you can contact the REC team, qualification team, the operational account managers. They know what's going on. They'll be able to help signpost you in the right direction as well. And we do have quite a lot of content on our Knowledge Centre, on our wiki pages around market-wide half-hourly settlement, and included on there are links to a recent MHHS training day that we did. All the sessions were recorded for that, so you can watch those sessions at your leisure. And I think that was my last slide. If there's any
That's
questions.
Great. There's no questions as of yet, but I'm conscious of time. So we do have a question slide at the end. If anything does come up, we can look at those then. So I'm just going to as quickly as I can. I'm sure everybody kind of wants to get outside and enjoy the sunshine and get some lunch. So I'll just kind of highlight the key areas of engagement within the REC. So firstly, it's been mentioned numerous times, but the service desk is probably the best place to go to begin with. And you can do that via emailing. So that's inquiries@recmanager.co.uk, or the live chat on the portal, or the dedicated service desk page on the portal as well. I think, again, a lot of this is repeated, so sorry that you're hearing it over again, but we aim to have the REC portal as self-serve as possible. So we've mentioned Wiki, that hosts a lot of key information, user guides, and I suppose to go on to events as well. So all previous events that we've had are held on Wiki, and all the sessions are recorded. So if there is something that you've missed, go and have a look there, and hopefully that should be able to help you. As Kev says, the OEMs, the ninjas, as he calls them, I was going to call them fountains of knowledge, but I mean, I suppose both are good for him. REC Party has one, so use them. They can help you as much as possible, and do take time to have those calls and just to get a good relationship with them. I've mentioned events. Committees have been mentioned briefly throughout the session, so there are ways to engage a bit more kind of informally, and that's via the REC issues group that was mentioned. We've got the change issues group and the OMF, so the operational metering forum. So anybody can join those and you can raise issues there, and it's just good to stay informed. The other committees that we have, all on the portal again, are the papers from them. So we've got headline reports, agendas, and everybody has access to those as well. And then Lydia's done a perfect example of the change process, so I won't divulge too much into those. But the bulletins have been mentioned quite a bit. But again, I would really recommend, if not already, signing up to those. And you can do that via the service desk. So we have a specific just a standard REC one, and then we have a specific change one, and these go out every Friday, and they include kind of all the information of the week and all the information that's coming up. And then just lastly, social media. So we do have a LinkedIn page where we post regularly. There'll be key updates surrounding events, any publications of recordings from events as well. And as Lydia said, our kind of monthly podcasts as well are all available on there, which will link you as well to our dedicated YouTube page. Again, that is a whistle-stop tour, very conscious of time. Also, just before we finish, these slides will be made available on Wiki next week along with the recording, and there will be a slide at the end of this that would include all the useful links. I think a few things have been mentioned, like specific wiki pages, specific user guides, REC schedules, for example. They will all be listed on, so you'll have access to them. So don't worry if you haven't got a lot of the information down today. I know it's been a lot of information for you. But before we get on to the questions quickly, we do have a survey that we would really appreciate you taking part in. And that's just to provide feedback on today's session, what you found useful, if there was anything that we can improve. Obviously, we're trying to constantly improve these sessions for you, so you can get as much kind of usefulness out of them as possible. So yeah, please take the time just to answer those. But we'll quickly go on to and see if there's any questions that we have. At the moment, there's nothing, which I suppose is good news. So yeah, I'll leave that on there for a kind of a few more seconds. But that will conclude today's session. So I hope you have found today's session useful. And if there is any questions that we didn't get to cover off, or you didn't have the opportunity to ask, please do send an email into inquiries, and obviously we can pass those along to the presenters today.